Hey everybody, Carpo here, and I'm absolutely fascinated by nature. I mean, who isn't, right? But, I like to watch documentaries about nature, and I remember it all started back in the old days with the old Discovery Channel, and they'd always have that joke about stoners sitting there, whoa, watching the lions eat and stuff. We've come a long way, and the science has come a long way, and I was fascinated by a show I watched last night, and it was called, I'll try to post up the link in the description, but it's, I think it's Nature. It's like a PBS show or one of those, it was called What Plants Talk About, and just amazing stuff. And I had a little paper with all these like notes that I was going to try to document and tell you about, but I don't have it with me. Couldn't find it anywhere. I misplaced it last night, but some of the craziest shit that we always assumed and knew was true is finally being proven in a scientific context to where people can go, okay, so there's something to this. If you'd told us, a scientist years ago, 20 years ago, that plants act as a community and feed each other and nurture their children, they would laugh at you, and you would be just totally, laughed out of the park. The fact is, that's what happens. And we've had this image when we've been raised to think that plants compete for sunlight, and so these people did these studies to try to prove that that wasn't true, or whether that was true or not. And as it turns out, I'll try to put it in a nutshell here. They use Douglas firs out here in the Northwest as an example, and when they drop their seeds, a mother who has say some kids growing near her, right? She drops some pine cones and another tree grows near her. That's her offspring. Well, they actually nurture their offspring. They don't compete for sunlight. That's not what it's about. The bigger trees actually feed the smaller trees, and what they did was they put a plastic bag over a branch on one of the mother trees, and they filled it with a radioactive gas. And then they came back the next day, and they brought I'm having a brain fart, detector, whatever, I can't remember what they're called, and they checked for radiation in the tree. They followed the line all the way down the tree, and then out through the root system, across the ground, and then a ways away, a little baby tree that was just loaded. It was just crazy. The thing was just going off, and they were just shocked. They find out that this mother tree is pumping nutrients back through the soil to the other one. But that's not even the most fascinating part. They grew seeds next to each other and found out that they read the chemical signals from each other. If they grew one seed in a petri dish, it grew a big root system, right? They grew two next to each other, and they only grew half as much of a root system. And it wasn't because they were competing, because they had plenty of room to grow. It was because they were aware of each other's presence, completely aware, and able to share the nutrients with their like kind. And I mean, the implications of that are nuts, but if you think about the plant that was feeding the other trees, this was the amazing part, was that the root system of a tree doesn't connect to the other trees. That's not how it works. That's where it gets fun. Mushrooms, fungus, mycorrhizae, we've got the mats of, that run across basically huge portions of land, these mats underneath ground that are the mushroom's root system. And these mats connect the trees to each other, and they push and pull nutrients and information back and forth between the trees, and chemical signals between the trees. If one tree is being attacked, it could send a chemical signal out to the other trees to watch their back, right? Well, that might not, tree can't really watch its back, right? Well, a smaller plant can, a flower can. Tobacco plant, the wild tobacco plant, has a natural predator, which is the nighthawk moth has the caterpillar that becomes a nighthawk moth, right? Well, the moth helps the tobacco plant, and it's the only pollinator of the tobacco plant. This tobacco plant, this wild tobacco, it flowers at night, and this moth comes and pollinates it. And while it's there, it lays its offspring in the stem. Then these caterpillars are born and they eat the hell out of the plant, right? So it's kind of a love-hate relationship. I mean, like all the rest of them, it's perfect. But it even gets crazier because the tobacco plant, when it gets attacked too much, say too many caterpillars are on it, it goes through a phase of changes where within 7 days it changes its flower structure. The standard tobacco flower is kind of like a trumpet. Well, or no, it turns into kind of like a trumpet, but the initial one's kind of like just a cone, so the moth can pollinate it. So when it's having problems with too many caterpillars, it sends out a chemical signal to the other plants to do the same thing, and they all start, they all stop flowering, and then they start flowering in the daytime instead of the night. And when they do flower, they flower with big, long trumpet flowers for the hummingbird. And then it sends out a chemical signal to the hummingbird, and the hummingbird comes and eats the caterpillars. And the plant knows when this happens. The thing that the guys were saying is that we don't understand how these plants can do this because there's no mind, there's no brain. Where does the plant hold its information? And I was just laughing under my breath thinking about it, because those of us who look into these things a lot know that plants are aware. I mean, and you tell a person that, well, of course plants can think, but did you really think that plants were aware that when you walk up, to pick a fruit, it knows your intent? Or when you cut a branch off of a tree, it's aware of it. Check this out. They have this one particular vine. It's like the strangler vine, and it has no root system. It's a parasite. And in slow motion, in normal motion, it's just a vine looking for a host. But these things sprout out of the ground like a worm, and then they spin around in circles and try to find the one. They know which plant they want. They've done studies where they have 2 different kinds of plants, and it always goes for the tomato plant, like 99% of the time. And so these plants are interacting with each other. Plants know what they want. So if you look at this little thing spinning around, it's like a worm, and attaches itself to the plant, sucks it dry. When you put the plant life in fast motion, it's just shocking. I mean, I've said before, like when you think of flowers, people think of flowers as blooming, and they bloom slowly, and they're beautiful. The truth is, they're exploding. They're exploding with color. Just boom, boom, boom. If you were to speed everything up, 1,000,000 times, and just watch it, they would be nothing, And in the big picture of things, and it's just, I wish I had my notes, because I'm trying to remember some of these things that happen besides these other plants. I think the thing that really got me was the fact that the trees actually share through the fungal system, and they're aware of each other. But mushrooms can send signals through miles across land, because they have really deep root systems, and the mats that they have are they're intense. There was one in Eastern Oregon that's like, I think 45 acres or something like that. It's big. Maybe it's even bigger than that. But the chemical defense of a plant is very similar to the chemical defenses that we have, and we could really learn a lot from this by observing the way that plants behave with each other, because the fact that plants do this, that they share with one another, I guess any person could take from it what they want. A person could say, hey, that means nothing, whatever, that's just natural, that's how plants evolved. In my personal opinion, I used to believe in natural selection and evolution, which I still do to an extent, but it just never answered the questions I've asked myself. Like, how do these flowers know to do this? How do they know to cater to certain bugs and then to other ones? That's not a random mutation. That's conscious effort. So then you get into this whole thing about intelligent design, and then all these people start saying, oh yeah, Jesus did it, God did it, and the Christians jump on it, then all of a sudden people back away, and I hate using that word intelligent design, but I don't know what else to use. To me, when I look around, in my brain, I consider myself an intelligent person, a person who tries to sift through the bullshit. And I believe that things are intelligent, that everything has an intellect, that there's a consciousness, a collective awareness of everything. So when you have an intent to do something, whether as an individual or as a group, nature knows that. And if plants can read the chemical signals of each other, they can surely read the chemical signals of you. And perhaps nature is reading chemical signals from our society right now and saying, how do we act as a whole? I mean, nature, if these plants, individual groups of plants have this consciousness, we know that there's a collective from all of them. So what are the plants going to do? If they can act against a predator and perhaps they can call a predator to us. Maybe plants themselves are the ultimate producers of the deadliest virus that will appear one day and wipe out humanity. Or, maybe plants conspire against people or conspire against, things that are wrong. And that's why I try to keep my intent clean and my conscience clean, because I have a strange feeling when I'm in the woods that plants are aware of me. I always have, since I was a kid. I hug trees, I talk to plants. And now, everything I feel like that people thought I was eccentric, and now I've seen science where they show that talking to plants actually makes them grow bigger. And scientists would try to say, well, it's just the vibrations that you're putting into the air, so they tried different experiments. They've done ones where, for tons of, there were a lot of studies done back in the 15 and 1600s where they would say talk to plants and ask them to grow. One guy said, look, you can't just talk to plants and you can't just think and have intent. You have to ask them kindly to do what you want them to do. And I was like, well, okay, that makes sense. You can't just look at a plant and say, oh, grow big and strong. It doesn't know what you want. Of course, if your intent's behind it, that's great. But it's kind of like saying a prayer. Some people can't. Some people aren't happy with just being in the presence of everything. They have to actually say a prayer out loud to make themselves feel like they've got it across. And I think that's noble, and that's a great, a great way for some people. And they're embracing what they know and the way they know to, and maybe that's the most effective way to be. Say your intents out loud, all your intents. Don't just think, oh, I'm going to have a great day today. Look at yourself and say, I'm going to have a great day today. But, with the plants, I've always had this notion that it's orderly. And through my research, I confirmed it, Everything is orderly. Everything's in its place. And, people are really concerned with invasive species these days, and they had a name for that on that show. They're kind of like, you could look at them as like the bullies. There's certain plants, just like animals, that are bullies, and when you bring them to a new environment, they just go crazy. Now, the reason they do that, and this is my belief. I guess this is, I'm speculating here, but I'm going to assume that when a plant's introduced to a new environment, the existing plants have not yet acclimated to this plant. They have not yet developed defenses against this plant. And it's kind of like a new guy coming in, and it's like, you don't know what to do. You don't want to step on his toes because you don't know who he is, that kind of stuff. And then you get to know him, and then you're like, wait a minute, okay, now let's be fair here, let's be balanced. Everybody gets their spot. And what I'm saying is that every invasive species, it's not just a human thing. Invasive species have floated across oceans for millions of years on coconuts. Spiders come out of coconuts on beaches from Africa all the way across the ocean. They colonize, and people don't know where they come from. All kinds of strange plants ride in on mats of seaweed, all kinds of stuff like that. And seeds are a subject for a completely different video because they're shocking in their own way. Seeds are amazing. Like, just a little embryo with that sac in it. It's like just waits and waits and waits for the right moment. Like, got some water, and score it, scratch it a little bit, or soak it in some acid, or whatever you have to do. Soak your seeds in hydrochloric acid, big seeds, before you plant them, and they'll sprout faster. And the reason being is because that's basically what's in your stomach, your stomach acid. You digest your certain foods, and seeds don't get digested; they get crapped out. That's why you crap out corn. It's meant to be that way. And it goes on to, be deposited in a new area. And plants develop these ways of transporting themselves that can't be explained by conventional mutations. It just, some of these spores and plants are just, they can survive in space. And it makes you wonder about, panspermia, the population of planets through cosmic dust and comets. And ferns, are a completely different subject. Ferns are amazing. They haven't changed in 350 million years. They've been around since the first dinosaurs, and they're still the same. And they've just got those little tiny dots on the bottom of them. Those are spores, and that's how they're the only plant that I know of besides mushrooms that has spores. And what an amazing concept! They've cosmic spores, space spores. It could just be everywhere. It could just be inundated with this stuff everywhere. There could just be little tiny spores floating around everywhere, just waiting, hitting planets, saying, "Okay, help! This one's good, right time." But how do plants develop these things, and how does this happen through just random mutation? It doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. I don't understand how people can do that or believe that, other than the fact that it makes them feel more comfortable believing that it's easy to answer. Because if you can believe in evolution completely and natural selection, say, okay, well, the genes mutated, and now the hummingbird has a long beak that matches this flower. Boom, the flower grows. When an invasive species moves to a new area, what I was going to say is they eventually will acclimate. And obviously, because we look around and things are just the way they are. The plants find a way, and then they get pushed out and pushed out. It's kind of like a wave, an ebb and flow, the tides of the woods. If you were to look at a million times time lapse through the rainforest, it would just be shocking. It would just be like little patches and swaths in different areas, and same thing with the Northwest, and all places. Deserts come and go, people come and go, plants come and go. But it's time that we all realize that there is a consciousness behind plants, and that they're aware of us, and we need to be aware of them, because they're everywhere. I feel bad for folks that live in the city that don't get a chance to, really see more than the planted trees locally. I couldn't do that, but and then there's the folks that live out in the middle of nowhere. That's all they have is nature. And it's funny because if you live out in the middle of nowhere, a lot of, you may think, some people love it, and some people say, oh, it's lonely, there's nobody to talk to, nothing to do. But you're there with the consciousness and awareness, an entity right there around you, nature. And I don't know, I'm just going to start looking at things completely differently after some of those newfound ideas and those new research. It's amazing stuff, and plants are shocking. I just can't get over the fact that plants feed their young. We have a lot to learn from plants. Peace.